10-year-old Jordan Hayes sat on the edge of his twin bed, carefully coloring the scuffed toe of his sneaker with a black Sharpie, praying it would look new enough for career day. The smell of the permanent marker was sharp in the small room, masking the scent of autumn leaves drifting in from the open window of the second-floor apartment. He bit his lip, his hand shaking slightly as he tried to cover the white mesh that was peeking through the worn fabric. In Fairfax, Virginia, where most kids at Liberty Elementary wore brand-new Jordans or pristine Nikes, Jordan's shoes told a story he didn't want anyone to read. He capped the marker and looked up at the framed photo on his nightstand. It showed him and his dad fishing at a lake last summer. In the picture, his father Raymond was wearing a faded gray t-shirt and a baseball cap, looking like any other dad in the neighborhood. That was the only version of his father Jordan was allowed to talk about. "We keep a low profile for safety, son," his dad always said. Jordan understood the rules, but today, looking at his patched-up shoes, the rules felt heavier than usual. "Pancakes are getting cold, soldier." His father's voice boomed from the kitchen, warm and steady. Jordan grabbed his backpack and walked out. The apartment was clean but modest beige carpet that had seen better days, a second-hand sofa, and walls bare of any expensive art. In the kitchen, Raymond Hayes stood by the stove, flipping a pancake with the precision of a tactical maneuver. He was a mountain of a man, broad-shouldered and fit, wearing his favorite Army Dad t-shirt that had a small hole in the collar. "Nervous?" Raymond asked, sliding a stack of pancakes onto Jordan's plate without looking up. "A little," Jordan admitted, climbing onto the stool. "Preston Vance said his dad is bringing a piece of a satellite to class. And Sophia's mom is bringing cupcakes from her bakery." He poked at his syrup. I don't want them to laugh at you, Dad. Or at us." Raymond stopped. He turned off the stove and leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. The playful morning energy shifted into something deeper, calmer. "Jordan, look at me." Jordan looked up. His father's eyes were kind but intense. "Do you remember what I told you about leadership? Real power doesn't need to shout." Jordan recited the family motto. "That's right," Raymond said, walking over to fix Jordan's collar, his large hands gentle. "It just needs to show up. People can judge our apartment, or our car, or your shoes. But they don't know who we are. Integrity isn't about what you wear, son. It's about what you carry inside." He tapped Jordan's chest. "I promised I'd be there today, didn't I?" "Yes, sir," Jordan whispered, feeling a little straighter. "Then I'll be there. I have a briefing at the Pentagon, but I'm making a detour. Now eat up. The bus won't wait." 10 minutes later, Jordan was out the door. Raymond watched from the window until the yellow school bus turned the corner. As soon as the bus disappeared, the warmth in Raymond's face hardened into professional focus. He picked up his secure satellite phone from the counter, the one that never rang for ordinary reasons. He dialed a short code. "This is General Hayes," he said, his voice dropping an octave, commanding absolute authority. "Update my security detail. I'm making a change to the schedule. We're engaging a civilian stop at Liberty Elementary at 0900 hours. Full protocol." He hung up and walked toward the bedroom closet, bypassing the jeans and t-shirts to reach for the garment bag in the back, the one holding the dark blue uniform with 4 silver stars on each shoulder. Jordan stepped onto the school bus, clutching his backpack, unaware that his dad's detour was about to trigger a national security protocol at his school. The parking lot of Liberty Elementary looked less like a school and more like a luxury car showroom, filled with gleaming BMWs and oversized Escalades. Jordan pulled his hood up as he stepped off the yellow school bus, the only vehicle that squeaked when it stopped. He kept his head down, navigating through a sea of parents in tailored suits and designer dresses, clutching Starbucks cups like accessories. He slipped his hand into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the folded notebook paper where he had written his speech. "Integrity isn't about what you wear," he reminded himself, trying to summon the strength of his father's voice over the intimidating chatter of the crowd. Inside room 402, the air smelled of chalk dust and expensive perfume. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling stood by the door, a sentinel in a navy blazer with a sparkling American flag pin on her lapel. She greeted the parents with a practiced, radiant smile that seemed to dim by several watts whenever she looked down. "Good morning, Mr. Vance. So wonderful to see you," she gushed, shaking hands with a man wearing a watch that probably cost more than Jordan's family car. When Jordan walked past, she didn't offer a hand. Her eyes flickered briefly to his blackened sneakers, and her lips pursed into a thin, tight line. "Take your seat, Jordan," she said, her voice dropping to a chilly, professional monotone. "And try to tuck your shirt in. We have guests." The morning announcements crackled overhead, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Jordan stood with his hand over his heart, reciting the words about liberty and justice for all, wondering if Mrs. Sterling believed those words applied to everyone in the room. "Welcome, everyone, to Career Day," Mrs. Sterling announced, clasping her hands together. "We're so lucky to have such successful role models here in Fairfax. Let's begin with Preston." Preston Vance marched to the front, chest puffed out. He pointed to his father. "My dad is a senior lobbyist," Preston declared, projecting his voice just like he'd practiced. "He meets with senators to help pass laws. Last summer, we even went on a yacht with the vice president." The parents murmured in appreciation. Mrs. Sterling beamed, looking as if she had personally raised Preston herself. "Excellent, Preston. Class, this is what the American dream looks like. Hard work and high connections." She applauded, and the room followed suit. Jordan sat still, his stomach churning. He looked at the empty chair near the door. His dad wasn't here yet. Mrs. Sterling scanned her clipboard, her finger trailing down the list of names. She paused, her brow furrowing slightly as if she had encountered a smudge on the paper. She sighed, a short, sharp sound that signaled inconvenience. "All right, let's keep moving. We have a tight schedule." She looked up, her gaze landing squarely on Jordan. "Jordan Hayes, you're up." Jordan walked to the front of the room, feeling the heavy silence of judgment pressing down on his shoulders, holding the paper that was about to ruin his day. Jordan cleared his throat, his voice shaking as he read the first sentence. "My father is a 4-star general in the United States Army." The words hung in the air, heavy and awkward, instantly sucking the oxygen out of the room. A few students giggled, a sharp, cruel sound that bounced off the linoleum tiles. Preston Vance leaned back in his chair, whispering something to his neighbor that made them both smirk. Jordan's grip on the paper tightened, crinkling the edges, but he forced himself to look down and continue reading the words he had written with such pride the night before. "He has served our country for 30 years, Jordan continued, his voice gaining a fraction more strength. "He has commanded troops in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Korea. He says that true leadership isn't about giving orders, but about serving those who follow you. He taught me that a general's job is to protect people who can't protect themselves." Jordan paused, waiting for the applause that had followed Preston's speech. Instead, he was met with a stifling silence. The parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging confused glances. Mrs. Sterling wasn't smiling anymore. Her face had gone rigid, her eyes narrowing behind her rimless glasses as she stepped away from her desk. "Stop," Mrs. Sterling said. It wasn't a shout, but it cut through the room like a knife. "Just stop right there, Jordan." She marched to the center of the room, her heels clicking ominously on the floor. She stopped directly in front of him, looming over his small frame. "Jordan, I explicitly asked the class for a nonfiction essay. Do you know what nonfiction means?" She didn't wait for an answer. "It means truth. It means reality. This is a fairy tale you've cooked up to impress our guests, and frankly, it is disrespectful to the people in this room who actually work hard for their success." "It's not a story, Mrs. Sterling," Jordan whispered, his face burning hot as 30 pairs of eyes drilled into him. "My dad really is a general. He leads the strategic command at—" "Enough," Mrs. Sterling snapped, losing her composure. She crossed her arms, looking down at his worn-out sneakers with unfiltered disdain. "Let's be realistic, shall we? Generals live in large estates in McLean or Great Falls. They drive luxury cars. Their children attend private academies, not Liberty Elementary. And they certainly do not send their sons to school in those." She gestured vaguely at his entire outfit, her voice dripping with pity that felt worse than anger. "There is no shame in your father having a regular job, Jordan. But lying about it? Claiming he is a high-ranking officer when you live in those rental apartments? That is a character flaw I cannot tolerate." Before Jordan could protest, she reached out and snatched the essay from his hands. The sound of the paper tearing echoed in the silent room, a sharp, violent rip that made several parents flinch. She tore it once, then again, letting the pieces fall like snow onto Jordan's scuffed shoes. "Go to the principal's office." She pointed to the door, her fingers shaking with indignation. "Sit there and think about why honesty matters. We will discuss your punishment when I have time." Tears stung Jordan's eyes, blurring his vision, but he refused to let them fall. He looked at the shredded remains of his hard work on the floor, then up at the teacher who had just stripped him of his dignity. "He's coming," Jordan said, his voice barely audible but steady. "He promised." Mrs. Sterling laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Oh, I'm sure he is. And if a 4-star general walks through that door, I'll eat my chalk. Now get out." As Jordan walked out, the sound of his classmates giggling followed him, but neither Mrs. Sterling nor the students heard the low rumble of heavy engines approaching the school gates. The intercom on the classroom wall buzzed with a frantic, static-filled screech that made Mrs. Sterling jump, interrupting her lecture on the importance of truth. She pressed a hand to her chest, clearly rattled, and glared at the speaker box as if it were a student speaking out of turn. The atmosphere in room 402 had been suffocating ever since Jordan's exit. The parents were shifting in their seats, exchanging hushed, uneasy whispers. Even Preston Vance had stopped smirking, sensing that the teacher had perhaps gone too far. Mrs. Sterling, desperate to regain control of the narrative, smoothed her skirt and forced a bright, tight smile. "Technical difficulties," she chirped nervously. "Now, as I was saying, integrity is the bedrock of." The door flew open with a bang that made everyone jump. Principal Miller burst into the room, her usually pristine hair slightly disheveled and her face drained of all color. She wasn't walking. She was practically running, ignoring the stunned parents and the wide-eyed students. "Patricia," Principal Miller hissed, forgetting to use Mrs. Sterling's last name in front of the students. She rushed to the teacher's desk, breathless. "We have a situation. A code red, no, a VIP protocol. I don't even know what to call it." Mrs. Sterling blinked, confused. "Principal Miller, we are in the middle of career day. I just had to discipline a student for lying, and—" "Who?" Principal Miller interrupted, grabbing Mrs. Sterling's arm, her grip tight with panic. "Was it Jordan Hayes? Tell me you didn't send Jordan Hayes to my office." "Well, yes," Mrs. Sterling stammered, taken aback by the fear in her boss's eyes. "He was making up elaborate stories about the Pentagon and generals. I couldn't let him disrupt the—" "You idiot," Principal Miller whispered, the words slipping out in horror. "The Pentagon is on the phone. Right now. They wanted to know if the perimeter was secure for arrival." Before Mrs. Sterling could process the absurdity of that statement, a deep, rhythmic vibration began to hum through the floorboards. It wasn't the rattle of the old school heating system, and it certainly wasn't a school bus. It was the low, powerful growl of heavy-duty engines. "Look," a student near the window shouted, breaking the rule about staying in seats. "It's the FBI. Or spies." Chaos erupted. Students scrambled to the windows. Mrs. Sterling shouted for order, but even the parents were standing up now, drawn to the spectacle outside. Through the glass, the scene looked like something out of a Hollywood action movie. 3 massive, black Chevrolet Suburbans with tinted windows and government plates screeched to a precision halt along the curb, right in the no-parking fire lane. The doors of the front and rear vehicles flew open in perfect synchronization. 6 men in dark suits stepped out. They moved with fluid, lethal grace, scanning the roof, the playground, and the entrance. They wore earpieces and sunglasses, despite the autumn clouds. One of them tapped his wrist and spoke into his sleeve, then nodded toward the school entrance. "Oh my God," Preston's father, the lobbyist, whispered, standing by the window. "That's a full security detail. That's Secret Service level." Then the door of the middle SUV opened. A single figure stepped out. He didn't look like a parent coming for career day. He looked like history walking. He was a tall, imposing African-American man wearing the Army service uniform, the dress blues. The dark blue jacket was immaculate, tailored to perfection. Rows of colorful ribbons and medals stacked high on his chest caught the light, each one a testament to campaigns fought and survived. The gold stripes on his trousers gleamed, but it was the shoulders that stole the air from the room. 4 silver stars on each epaulette. General. 4-star General. Mrs. Sterling felt her knees turn to water. She grabbed the edge of her desk to keep from collapsing. No, she breathed, her mind reeling, trying to reject the reality unfolding before her eyes. That's not possible. The shoes. He had old shoes. The general didn't wait for a visitor's pass. He didn't check in at the front desk. He walked straight toward the main doors, flanked by his security detail, moving with a stride that commanded the earth to steady itself beneath his feet. A moment later, the heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside room 402. Clack, clack, clack. Slow, deliberate, terrifying. The classroom door swung open. General Hayes stepped across the threshold. The room goes deathly silent, the kind of silence where you can hear a heartbeat. He stood there, framing the doorway, his presence filling every inch of space. He removed his service cap and tucked it under his arm. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the room until they landed on the empty desk where his son should have been. Then, slowly, his gaze shifted to the woman standing by the chalkboard, trembling in her sensible heels. Mrs. Sterling stopped breathing as the man she had called a myth stood 5 feet away, looking not at the principal, but directly at her. General Hayes didn't shout. His voice was quieter than the hum of the fluorescent lights, yet it carried more weight than a scream. He stood in the center of the room, an island of calm amidst the storm of shock he had created. He didn't acknowledge Principal Miller's stammered apology, nor did he glance at the wealthy parents who were now looking at him with a mixture of awe and embarrassment. His focus was singular, locked onto the small, trembling figure sitting alone at the back of the room near the door, the only empty desk. With a fluid motion that defied the stiffness of his uniform, the general walked past the frozen Mrs. Sterling as if she were merely a piece of furniture. He knelt down beside Jordan's desk, ignoring the fact that his pristine dress trousers were touching the dusty classroom floor. The room watched, mesmerized, as the terrifying commander transformed instantly into a gentle father. "I told you I'd be here, son," General Hayes said softly, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out and wiped a stray tear from Jordan's cheek with a thumb that had signed deployment orders for thousands of troops. "I'm sorry I was late. Security checks take longer than they used to." "She tore it up, Dad," Jordan whispered, his voice cracking, pointing to the trash can. "She said you weren't real. She said generals don't wear old shoes." General Hayes's jaw tightened, a muscle feathering in his cheek. He stood up slowly, unfolding his full height until he seemed to touch the ceiling. He walked over to the wastebasket, retrieved the crumpled, torn halves of the essay, and smoothed them out on Mrs. Sterling's desk. The sound of the crinkling paper was the only noise in the room. He turned to face the teacher. Mrs. Sterling was shaking so hard her flag pin was vibrating. She looked small, pale, and utterly defeated. "Ma'am," General Hayes began, his tone polite but cuttingly cold. "My son wrote that leadership means serving others. He learned that watching his mother save lives as a surgeon, and watching me serve this country for 30 years. He knows more about integrity at age 10 than most adults learn in a lifetime." He picked up the torn paper. "But you didn't see him, did you? You saw a zip code. You saw an apartment complex. You saw a pair of shoes that have walked miles because my son is humble enough not to ask for new ones every month." "General, Mrs. Sterling's voice failed her. Tears began to spill down her cheeks, washing away the facade of the strict disciplinarian. "I didn't know. I assumed." "Assumption is the mother of all failures," General Hayes said. "You judged a book by its cover, Mrs. Sterling. And in doing so, you almost tore apart a young man's honor. You taught this class that value is determined by appearance, not character. That is a dangerous lesson." Mrs. Sterling bowed her head, sobbing openly now. "I was wrong. I was so incredibly wrong. I looked at his shoes and I judged his soul. I am so sorry, Jordan. I am so sorry, General. I don't deserve to teach here." The room held its breath. Principal Miller looked ready to fire her on the spot. The parents waited for the hammer to drop. This was the moment of vengeance they expected. But General Hayes did something no one saw coming. His expression softened. The steel in his eyes melted into something resembling grace. He reached into his pocket. Mrs. Sterling flinched, perhaps expecting a lawsuit or a formal complaint. Instead, the general pulled out a heavy, gold-plated coin. It bore the insignia of the Strategic Command on one side and the American flag on the other. A challenge coin traditionally given by commanders to soldiers for acts of extreme excellence. He took Mrs. Sterling's trembling hand and pressed the coin into her palm, closing her fingers over the cold metal. "Ma'am," he said, his voice gentle now. "In the army, we give these coins to soldiers who go above and beyond. But I'm giving this to you for a different reason. It takes a hell of a lot of courage to admit when you are wrong in front of a room full of people. You made a mistake today. A big one. But you owned it." He held her gaze. "Keep this. Put it on your desk. Let it remind you every single day that leadership is about lifting people up, not tearing them down. Don't look at their shoes, Mrs. Sterling. Look at their eyes." Mrs. Sterling looked down at the heavy gold coin in her palm, tears blurring her vision, realizing she had just been given a second chance she didn't deserve. The air in the room had shifted, scrubbed clean of judgment, replaced by a warm, reverent awe that seemed to touch every parent and student. It was as if a heavy curtain had been pulled back, letting in light where there had only been shadows. Mrs. Sterling, still clutching the gold command coin as if it were a lifeline, took a deep, shuddering breath. She didn't retreat to her desk to hide her shame. Instead, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and turned to the chalkboard, where a roll of Scotch tape sat next to the eraser. With trembling fingers, she picked up the two halves of Jordan's essay, the paper she had torn in anger only minutes before. The room watched in respectful silence as she carefully aligned the jagged edges. "Cynic. Cynic." The sound of the tape being pulled was loud in the quiet room. She didn't just repair the paper. She treated it like a fragile artifact. Once it was whole again, she walked over to the Star Student Bulletin board, removed Preston Vance's glossy, printed chart, and pinned Jordan's handwritten, taped-up essay right in the center. "Class," Mrs. Sterling said, her voice thick but steady. She turned to face her students, not as a superior, but as a learner. "I want you all to look at this. Today, Jordan taught us the most important lesson of the year. It wasn't about math or history or grammar. It was about respect." She looked at Jordan, her eyes soft. "Thank you for being brave enough to tell your truth, even when I wasn't smart enough to listen." Preston Vance, the boy who had bragged about yachts and senators, stood up slowly. He looked at his own father, then at the general, and finally at Jordan. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a newfound respect. He walked over to Jordan's desk and extended a hand. That was really cool, Jordan. Your dad is a hero." "Thanks," Jordan smiled, shaking Preston's hand. For the first time all year, he didn't feel like the poor kid in the apartment. He felt like an equal. The dismissal bell rang, but nobody rushed for the door. The parents lingered, lining up not to network with each other, but to shake General Hayes's hand. The lobbyist father, who had been so proud of his connections, bowed his head slightly as he shook the general's hand. "Thank you for your service, sir," he said, and for the first time he sounded humble. "And thank you for the reminder. I think we all needed it." General Hayes greeted everyone with the same polite grace, but his eyes never left his son. "Ready to go, trooper?" he asked, placing a protective hand on Jordan's shoulder. "Yes, sir," Jordan beamed. They walked out of the classroom together, the sea of parents parting to let them through. As they stepped out of the school building and into the crisp autumn air, the heavy black SUVs were waiting, engines humming. The security detail opened the rear door, but Jordan paused. He looked down at his feet. The black marker on his left sneaker had smudged slightly, revealing the worn white mesh underneath. "Dad?" Jordan asked quietly, looking up at the man who could command armies, but chose to fly across the country, just to attend a fourth-grade career day. "Yeah, son. Do we need to get new shoes?" "Now that everyone knows." General Hayes knelt down one last time on the concrete sidewalk, ignoring the Secret Service agents checking the perimeter. He looked at the old shoes, then looked deep into his son's eyes. "Jordan, we can buy new shoes if you need them. But remember what happened in there. Those people didn't respect you at the end because of your shoes. They respected you because you told the truth. Shoes wear out, son. But character? That lasts forever. The shoes don't make the man, Jordan. The steps he takes do. Jordan looked at his sneakers, then back at the school where Mrs. Sterling was watching from the window. He smiled. He didn't feel the need to hide them anymore. He climbed into the back seat of the armored vehicle, sitting tall. As the black SUV pulled away, leaving the stunned school behind, Jordan knew that while his shoes were old, his walk had never been stronger. Just like an old pair of sneakers can carry a future hero, the truest value of a person is often hidden beneath a humble surface. Jordan taught us that integrity doesn't need to shout to be heard, and General Hayes showed us that true power lies not in punishment, but in the grace of forgiveness. So the next time you are tempted to judge a book by its worn-out cover, take a moment to look inside, because kindness is the only rank that truly matters in the end.